You are listening to MCC Votes and Seats, the podcast series of the Center for Political Science of Mathias Corvinus Collegium. We provide election insights with experts and politicians.
Hello and welcome back to the Votes and Seats podcast. My name is Tot, and we are glad you're here with us today as we dive into one of the most important recent political events in Central Europe, the lower house election in the Czech Republic that was held on the 3rd and the 4th of October 2025. It is an honor to us having political scientist Professor Ladislav Cabada, Vice Rector of the Metropolitan University Prague. Good afternoon, Ladislav. It is good to see you again.
Good afternoon from Czech Republic.
So, former Prime Minister Andrej Babiš's ANO movement became the largest player in parliament after the election. The governing parties and their partners, which were predicted to win only a maximum of around 70 seats, ended up obtaining 92 mandates, better than the polls indicated. ANO did better than anticipated as well. According to polling, the far-right SPD did not perform as well as anticipated, while the far-left Stachilo movement was unable to get into parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, in today's episode we'll discuss the implications of these results for Czech politics, the changing power dynamics, and what to look out for in the next months. The 71-year-old billionaire businessman Andrej Babiš considers the election result his biggest political victory so far. Ladislav, in your opinion, to what factors can the ANO party owe its confident popularity?
Yeah, I would say it's really a bulk of partial indicators that helped to ANO and to Andrej Babiš to win these elections. Not only to win, but really return and get extremely big electoral support. First issue I would say is it was clear opposition. The whole period of the last 4 years of the lower chamber and the government led by Prime Minister Petr Fiala, Andrej Babiš played the role of the voice of opposition. He declared himself as a leader of opposition. He also organized within his own party the shadow government, which was very visible, I would say, in its criticism against the government, and which was also continually developing the communication strategies with the electorate. The second very important issue is at the end of the story, already mentioned also in your speech and the basic presentation of our electoral results. We have had at least two other opposition actors or parties which in the public opinion surveys quite often were referred as promising coalition partners, but also the voice of really unsatisfied part of populations. At one side, the party you labeled as a radical right-wing party, and I agree with this label. So the Tomio Okamura's movement, Freedom and Direct Democracy at one side, who represents, I would say, most nationalist, in some cases even chauvinist policies, but also, and this has to be stressed, the chauvinist welfare policies. So there are also some leftist parts of this ideology. And on the other side, the Stachilo movement, which contained, above all, the former Communist Party, I would say not very reformed compared with the situation before 1989, and really collecting the streams or the parts of the society that might be labeled, in my opinion, as pro-Russian, pan-Slavonic, and really extreme left. And there's a big success of ANO party and Andrej Babiš is that in the last 2 weeks, he was able to present himself as a strong leader. He was able to present to a lot of voters who were thinking about supporting these two radical parties to change their opinion and to prefer his movement as a clear leader and even strengthen the result and also the difference between the first and the second in the race. And lastly, I would say Andrej Babiš was extremely successful presenting the key policies in his agenda, while the government and specifically the Prime Minister Fiala failed somehow when we are talking about this, I would say, prioritized policies. So the first reflections after the elections quite often stressed that Petr Fiala was maybe too much talking about the foreign policy, and the foreign policy was not as important for big parts of the Czech society, while Andrej Babiš was repeatedly and strongly stressing the internal issues. Should it be the purely economic affairs, or I would say related social affairs, and so on. And that seemingly big parts of Czech society were prioritizing the domestic policies and the domestic affairs generally, while the government was just too internationalized in this sense and not reflecting, I would say, what the society prefers.
I see. And later we will definitely touch upon more in detail the campaign topics. However, going back to the political parties, you mentioned the name Tomio Okamura, and it's a very interesting fun fact that the radical right party leader Tomio Okamura's brother is also a politician, but in a moderate Christian Democratic Party, and they are half Japanese, Korean. That's Czech Republic for you. Understanding the reasons behind Ano's strong popularity gives us valuable insights, obviously, into the current political climate. But to get the full picture, it's important to look beyond a single party. And let's now take a step back and explore the broader political landscape. Could you describe the background, the voter base, main programs and key figures of the most significant political parties and alliances in the Czech Republic?
Sure. Basically, I would like to stress at the very beginning that in the last 8 years, we can observe a strong polarization of Czech political arena. So I would say one factor was Andrej Babiš, of course. So especially the second earthquake elections in 2013 changed the landscape. Andrej Babiš became the most visible voice of these, I would say, challenger parties or newcomer parties, or as he stressed, movements. So he is labeling the so-called traditional parties as something wrong and mistaken, and presenting himself and these challenger parties or movements as, I would say, anti-corruption and promising new fact in Czech politics. And on the other side, the response on this challenge was the cooperation of the political parties, I would say, from the center to the liberal conservative right. So this is the creation of the electoral alliance called Together, following Czech Republic, led by the Civic Democratic Party and the new leader that also came after the elections in 2013. And this was the former rector of Masaryk University, political scientist Petr Fiala. And I would say this polarization continued. It was strengthened after the elections in 2021, when we have observed the change in the government, so the cooperation of Together Alliance and the second alliance, which might be labeled maybe as a liberal progressive, so the Czech Pirate Party, more or less ideologically green party in many ways, the Generation Party preferring digitalization and stressing the necessity of modernization of public administration and so on. And on the other side, very interesting political actor, and this is the alliance of mayors and independent candidates with the acronym STAN, and led by Vít Rakušan. And these two electoral alliances won in 2021 elections. One of the reasons was that Andrej Babiš, during his premiership between 2017 and 2021, I would say, weakened his coalition partners. At one side, the Social Democratic Party, and on the other side, also the Communist Party that supported the government. So I would say that this polarization was very visible in our politics in 2021 till 2025. And next to this, I perceive also one very important factor, and this was, I would say, the performance of Andrej Babiš as well as Petr Fiala's government. It was the impulse for the establishment of several extra parliamentary opposition movements and parties. We already mentioned the movement Stačilo enough, which combine, I would say, economically perceived extreme left approaches and policies, and on the other side, relatively strong nationalism and anti-European notions and stances. And last but not least, I have to stress the establishment of a brand new party with a very interesting name. It's Motorists Party, which became, I would say, a big challenger of one of the flagship policies of European Union. It is European Green Deal and European Green policies. And also stressing that this is the only clearly conservative political party in Czechia, while the Civic Democratic Party, led by Petr Fiala and influenced by the alliance partners, is moving a little bit too much towards the center. And this new post-Clausian, in many ways, conservative party, because the former president Václav Klaus plays the role of, I would say, the person behind the scene, and it was visible also immediately after elections. The leaders of the party have at the same evening, when we got the results, a beer with Václav Klaus publicly in the pub, and this party is perceived and presents itself as the, I would say, post-Clausian conservative party in Czech political environment. By the way, this party succeeded in the EP elections in 2024, and it also succeeded now, being, of course, the smallest of 6 parties that reached the threshold with less than 7%, but without the Motorist Party recently, Andrej Babiš will only hardly create the, should it be the majority government or even minority government with some specific ideological frame and support given by the smaller right-wing political parties, so the Okamura Party and Motorists. So this is the picture. To make it more complicated, I have to stress that specifically Tomio Okamura invited also really very small extra-parliamentary parties to the cooperation. So he invited the leaders of these parties to the ballot, and which means that not only that the Okamura Party lost approximately 20% of seats in the parliament compared with the previous electoral period, but 1/3 of the club it's presented by the leaders of other political parties than SPD, which seems to be firstly big complication for Okamura, because there was and is visible unsatisfaction within the party with this situation. And secondly, it might be also hard for him to cooperate with Andrej Babiš, because he cannot easily promise all voices from his club as a support for the minority government or even majority government on Andrej Babiš. He doesn't have full control over this, I would say, atomized political club in the lower chamber. So it complicates the situation. It atomizes the parliament itself. And my last point, we also expect that this atomization will continue as far as, of course, we observe the, I would say, centrifugal tendencies within the Together alliance. Defeated in the elections, of course, they are searching for new impulses, and one of these impulses might be that one or all parties just leave this cooperation and will continue individually in the next years.
And 2 more difficulties for Andrej Babiš's new government could be the upper house, when we talk about the legislation, where the former governing ruling parties still have a majority. At least until next year's elections, upper house elections, and the head of state, Petr Pavel, as well. He has a say, I think, in the government formation. Later we can discuss these things in more detail. And going back to the party, the Motorists, I know it's, and you already told our audience that the Motorist is not a 100% single-issue party, but it's still something like a single-issue party, and it's so strange. We don't really see such parties anymore in Europe, but that's the case if you have a proportional electoral system, and this makes the Czech electoral system so unique and special in Europe. But going back to the term movement, you use this term movement when you described Andrej Babiš's political formation. Do I understand correctly that the movement is different from political parties in that it is much more centralized and there are no really elements of grassroots democracy in it, or no general assembly pressures? It is much similar to a business model, right?
It's very complicated story, not only in the Czech case. I have to stress that we got the legislature on political parties only in 1990. And if you look at the title of this bill, it's bill about the political parties and movements. So it reflected the specific situation in the transition period and the existence of this parties movements, like it was the Hungarian Democratic Forum, for example, to make the comparison quick and easy. Recently, we observed the process, which is very visible not only in Czech case, that a lot of I would say newcomer parties or challenger parties do not use the term party. We can see it in Poland. We do have Law and Justice, and we do have a civic platform and so on. And it is perceived somehow that the people do not like the term party. And in that sense, I would say we do have also in other countries or nations in Europe-wide this situation with all these leagues and Brothers of Italy and Alternative and so on. So it's not unique. But of course, I have to stress that both visible movements in Czechia, at one side, the movement led by Tomio Okamura. By the way, it's the second party he established before we have a dawn of dynamic democracy, and specifically the anno 2011 movement are organized as the entrepreneurial parties. So the role of the leader and father grounder is very visible. Basically, we do not observe, I would say, some standard mechanism of intra-party life. They are not, for example, I would say challenging politicians that would compete, for example, for the party leadership. Maybe it has to be stressed that this situation means that, for example, the party leader can quite often change the strategy or even policy. So we observed that Andrej Babiš just decided at the very beginning to cooperate within the European faction called ALDE, or with the acronym ALDE, so liberals. And then he changed to Patriots for Europe, which has a completely different ideological profile. And there didn't exist any profound discussion within the movement or party about this change. So he is not only the father grounder, but really authoritarian leader of this movement. This might have also positive sides. In case you have some affair with some party leader, party member, and so on, Andrej Babiš just decides you are excluded from the party, and that's it. On the other side, of course, it's limiting the inter-party discussion and inter-party democracy itself. Andrej Babiš is also a veto player. So the party manifesto and internal party document says that he is deciding about the structure of all ballots, for example. He can change the names on the ballots and so on, which of course might be reflected as an authoritarian part of democratic politics. But it's workable. Definitely, it's a stabilizing factor, I would say. And we haven't observed any, I would say, strong inter-party dissent groups yet or until. So definitely it is something that brought also new potential, I would say.
Okay, so the party name itself is more about branding and not the content itself, but it still affects the political formation's characteristics. Having examined the factors behind ANO's confident popularity, it's equally important to look at the other side of the political spectrum. Understanding the dynamics of electoral success also means understanding electoral setbacks. So let's turn our attention to the former governing coalition. What could have caused the governing Spolu's defeat?
Yeah, maybe at the very beginning, looking at the electoral results, Spolu or together, and also the other partners. So I mean also the mayors and independent candidates, Stan, and also the Pirate Party, which was part of the government for more than 2 years. In some they got more ballots than 4 years ago. Statistically, they didn't lost anything, but the snowball effect we observe at the side of ANO just prevented that big sums of or big numbers of voices were excluded from the scrutiny. So they stood under 5%. But of course, I would say, and already I mentioned, I would say that the government was extremely successful when we are talking about, I would say, recovery in the relations with the European Union and the recovery in the relations with some, I would say, visible actors in European politics. But this is something that was not as interesting for the big parts of society. So nobody would reflect as the most important and even decisive factor that, for example, our government has developed excellent relations with Italy. It was very important at the European level, or excellent relations with Poland, but it was not as important for the domestic population. Secondly, the Czech society is strongly divided when we are talking about the support or reflection of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. It's fully comparable with the Slovak situation. So, in very short presentation and sentence, at one side we do have the political elite represented by the Fiala's government, strongly supporting the Ukrainian position in the conflict, strongly supporting also the idea that Czech Republic has to help as much as possible to Ukraine as a state and to Ukrainian refugees coming to Czech Republic. And on the other side, the society that was and is divided. So doesn't has this, I would say, visible and I would say black and white position in that sense. Third issue, it's about economic, more or less. And in that sense, the last 4 years was the period where we have faced, I would say, visible and strong inflation. So the cumulated inflation reached almost 30%. We have faced at least in the period 2020-23, I would say, dramatic growth of prices of energies. And all this, of course, influence on, I would say, not only the perception, but I would say it's about hard data. So there was a feeling of big groups of society that are economically losing compared with the period before 2021.
And you Czechs, you don't really like re-electing acting prime ministers. It happened only once, I seem to remember, in the 90s with Václav Klaus, I guess. And so no one could ever continue besides him his term as prime minister. Of course, Andrej Babiš will have most likely a second term, but he finished his first one 4 years ago. Okay, now that we've outlined the key political players in the election, it's essential to comprehend the context in which they competed. The issues at the heart of the campaign shaped both parties' strategies and voter preferences. Dear Professor, you mentioned earlier that from one side, internal issues like the cost of living, social welfare, taxes, energy prices, and these were the basic questions that ruled the campaign. And from the other side, external ones like the war in Ukraine emerged as the main campaign theme in this election. How were these topics addressed and framed by the different players?
Maybe I will begin with the government of Petr Fiala and Alliance Stachilo and a lot of mayors and independent candidates. So at the very beginning, the frame was that Czech Republic definitely needs some profound changes in managing the state. I have to stress that in 2021, Czech Republic faced increasing and I would say, at least in my perspective, dramatic budget deficit. So the Fiala government presented itself since the very beginning as a responsible government that is which has one very important strategic goal, and this is to stop this, I would say, negative development regarding the budget deficits and to bring some remedies into the behavior of the states when we are talking about economic balance. Of course, all this went completely out and diminished with the Russian aggressions against Ukraine. And we even had the situation that the government changed the government manifesto during this period and just stressed that we do have this unexpected black swan effect that influences the behavior. Nevertheless, the government really, I would say, changed the behavior of the state budget. And we can observe, when we look on statistical data, that the Czech Republic recently has the 5th healthiest economics in European Union. This might be perceived as a big success. On the other side, of course, this means that the government brought some visible parametric reforms. One of this very sensitive issue was the pension reforms. So the government changed the style and changed the indicators how the pensions are organized in Czechia or should be organized in the future. By the way, one of the very, very visible responses of Andrej Babiš was, once you elect me again, I will stop with this reform and return the situation to status quo ex ante. Secondly, I would say it was the government of 5 and later 4 political parties. And of course, for me as a political scientist, I have to stress, statistically, the government should not survive 2 years. So it's a surprise for me, and it was a surprise for several actors and observers that the government was able to survive 4 years. On the other side, it means, and it was definitely the most visible characteristics of the government and Petr Fiala as a prime minister. Of course, searching for so many consensus among 4 or even 5 political parties, you don't have the, I would say, clear answers. And quite often, you just present unclear pictures. You speak with more voices from one government, and I would say this is something that will be also in the future discussed as one of, I would say, the decisive points. On the other side, we have had really well-organized opposition. Andrej Babiš showed that he is, maybe this has to be stressed too. Andrej Babiš quite often talks about this movement as about catch-all party. So combining different ideological approaches, not excluding anyone, trying to present, I would say, inclusive policies in many ways and so on. But he really succeeded to present also other persons from the party. So other voices, other, I would say, priorities and so on. He even presented Karel Havlíček, the head of this shadow government, as the alternate, as a modality. Maybe it might happen that I will be too old to be prime minister, but Karel Havlíček is the second person in the party and so on. And I would say that this is also something that has to be stressed. ANO became attractive also for the people that stood out of politics for some reasons, and they returned from diplomacy, from state administration and so on. So I would say that this combination of strategic factors, but also I would say focus on clear policies, played a very important role.
Yes, and when talking about Andrej Babiš's EU perspectives, we have to stress that Babiš's ANO party, ANO movement, is in the same European Parliament party family as Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's Fidesz and the Austrian Freiheitssparta, Österreich, and many other sovereignist European political parties and movements. Figuring out why these issues we addressed upon earlier dominated the campaign gives us obviously valuable insights into the political mood of the electorate. But themes alone don't really win elections. How parties communicate their messages is just as crucial. Ladislav, were there any differences between the individual parties in terms of the campaign communication techniques they used?
I have to stress that, of course, we observe the combination of all standard tools of this, I would say, new political campaigning or new political marketing strategies. Very important are social networks. I have to stress that both Andrej Babiš and Tomio Okamura do have long-term tradition of presenting their political stances and rhetorics at Facebook and other social media. Already mentioned that TikTok became extremely popular among them, but of course also the government party. By the way, Pirate Party is the party that is strongly related with this digital framework in that sense. But of course, I have to stress that we do have also electronic media. It was very interesting for me that I saw the statistics and for example, at the TVs, the most presented leader was the leader of Stachvilo. So neither Prime Minister nor Andrej Babiš as the challenger, but a lady leader of a small party that at the end didn't reach the parliament was the most presented in televisions. And then we do have contact campaign. I have to stress that Andrej Babiš was very active. It's of course much easier for the opposition leader than for the prime minister to travel. The prime minister has to sit somewhere in Prague and or in Brussels or elsewhere and work. For the leader of opposition or for the opposition parties, it is much easier to communicate continually in the streets, in the squares, and so on. And Andrej Babiš was extremely active, I have to state, the whole 4 years. Maybe one issue. It was the activity of the Prime Minister Petr Fiala. He organized the meetings with the public. It was moderated by the known actor. What was for me interesting, basically Petr Fiala was in my eyes the only leader that didn't prevent to communicate with the opposing groups of society. So mostly we observe the strategy that at these direct meetings you prevent the presence of opposition, or you prevent the presence of individuals or groups that do not agree with you. Fiala was, in my eyes, the most visible actor that was really trying to communicate also with those who do not support his policies. But it was not a working strategy, I have to say. So what is the result for me? And I definitely need more data from the research. That the electoral campaign confirmed that the people are mostly closed in their bubbles, in some echo chambers and so on. And basically, it's almost impossible that in this strong, quite often affective polarization situation, you attract at least somebody, or at least small groups from the other side for your policies.
Okay, Babiš campaigned so actively that he even found himself in a really dangerous situation when he was hit in the head with a metal crutch at a campaign event. However, examining how parties communicated their messages helps us obviously grasping the strategies behind their outreach. But to fully understand how these strategies play out during elections, it's also important to consider the framework in which they operate. Dear Mr. Vice Rector, in a few sentences, very briefly, how would you describe the Czech electoral system? What makes it unique?
Yeah, I would say at one side it's very standard proportional system with thresholds. We do have the basic threshold at 5% nationwide, of course, and for the alliances or coalitions or of more parties, we do have this additive threshold of 7, 9, and at the end 11% for a coalition of 4 political parties. What is very important is are the differences. 14 electoral units which are equal with our regions, but they are populated in very different size. So at one side you have these 4 very visible big units who comprise more than 1/2 of all the deputies. It's Prague, Central Bohemia, surrounding Prague, and both Moravian units, North Moravia and South Moravia. On the other side, you have very small units, Karlsbad, the region with the Central Karlovy Vary, Karlsbad. They have had five mandates only. So of course, the national threshold is much higher than 5%. And for parties below 10%, it's almost impossible to reach any mandate there. Maybe 2 additional issues. Firstly, also the electoral turnout decides. So on the example of Karlsbad region, the electoral turnout was below the average of Czech Republic. So for the recent lower chamber, this region has only 4 deputies, not 5. So it was brought into other unit. Last but not least, for the first time, we used also this correspondence vote. There was big criticism of the opposition movement, specifically from ANO 2011. But first, the interest was much lower than expected, maybe. Secondly, we didn't face any problems when we are talking about the accountability or eligibility or legitimation of votes. So I would say the system works as technically it works perfectly. I have to stress, in the few hours after the elections, we do have the results.
Ladislav, your overview of the Czech electoral system sets the stage for perceiving how votes are translated into political power, but numbers alone don't tell the whole story. The geography of the results after reveals deeper social and demographic divides. Now turning to my favorite topic, what does the election map show us, and how can we explain the territorial, social and demographic cleavages behind it?
Yeah, it's a perfect question. I would say similarly that like in the Polish case, we quite often speak about the Czechia 1 and Czechia 2, and the electoral results supported this. So at one side we do have big cities, Prague, Brno, and several other big cities. On the other side we do have the so-called peripheries and semi-peripheries. There are economic differences, of course. There are development differences. And maybe I have to stress that quite often, and it was also shown in our focus groups we organized before elections. To live in the periphery just limits your life quite often, not only economically. These are the life expectancies. These are issues related with the health system and the capability of such systems and so on. And I would say that the people living at these peripheral places, quite often at the border with Germany, Poland, partly also with Austria, felt themselves forgotten, and in that sense, they reflected the promises given by Andrej Babiš as something that might improve their living standard. But of course, these are very, very long-term issues. So I have to stress, originating from Karlsbad region, that different governments and different strategies didn't brought visible change in the last 30 years. So that there must be some structural factors, and it's not as easy to overcome these structural factors also in the near future.
Dear Professor, is there anything you really found special or interesting about this 2025 lower house election in the Czech Republic compared to the earlier ones, former ones?
I would say electoral turnout, the first very positive factor, about 70%. It's something that shows that the people are interested in politics, and including the young generation. So we have had 400,000 first voters, and these people just came to the election. So that's very good information for me, because it stabilizes the democracy, it stabilizes the political institutions. It gives some, I would say, impulse of trustworthiness when we reflect political institutions. Second issue, I was surprised that Stachel didn't reach the parliament. It's a positive surprise for me, because it shows that the people are not as centrifugal as the political parties sometimes, that they are trying to find some consensus in that sense. Third factor, still I have to stress, we didn't speak about our president. The behavior of our president was really non-partisan, and it is the case also in the first days after elections. I perceive it as very important information for the citizens, that we do have the president that understands what does it mean the majority and minority, who understands what does it mean to change the government, who understands that we do not have only one modality, but we have to accept that there are different voices, different perceptions, and we have to understand, I would say, the plurality of our society. This is very important for me, also for the future.
I understand. I absolutely see your point. Professor Ladislav Cabada from the Metropolitan University Prague, thank you very much for joining us once again as our distinguished guest expert. We truly appreciate your most valuable insights. Dear listeners, as we've explored throughout this episode, the recent Czech parliamentary elections offer a rich picture of a political landscape in motion. From the key parties and alliances shaping the contest to ANO's confident victory, we've seen how both political strategy and public sentiment intersect. The campaign themes, communication techniques, and the structure of the Czech electoral system all played critical roles in shaping the outcome, while the territorial, social, and demographic cleavages remind us that elections are as much about people and places as they are about tactics and power games. I am Bálint Tóth, and this has been the latest episode of Votes and Seats, the podcast analysis of the MCC Center for Political Science. Thank you for joining us for this in-depth analysis. We hope today's discussion has provided you with a clearer understanding of the forces at play in Czech politics. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll continue to unpack the trends shaping European democracies. Thank you and goodbye.